When you look at the polls in New Hampshire, does Nikki Haley actually have a chance of winning there, of not just competing for second, but potentially competing for first?
Yes. It's the state Donald Trump is in the most danger of losing. And I'm going to make a really dated reference here, but we talked about it earlier if you were watching, and I think it's relevant to this discussion of what comes next. I said that the dynamics of this Republican race in Iowa most closely resembled the George W. Bush-John McCain race from back in 2000. And it starts here in Iowa because in 2000, if you remember, John McCain only did a half-hearted effort in Iowa. He spent some time in the state, but he was really camped out in New Hampshire. And as he was running far behind George W. Bush in Iowa with no expectation of beating him, he was spending money and time in New Hampshire and polling, even before Iowa, close to Bush in New Hampshire. Meanwhile, in Iowa, the DeSantis of 2000 was Steve Forbes. He camped out in the state. He made, a do-or-die effort in Iowa. He got second place to Bush, and his campaign was done. So it was Bush coming out winning Iowa, and then it was a candidate who was polling strongly in New Hampshire, who wasn't much of a factor in Iowa, John McCain, who went to New Hampshire. And John McCain upset, famously, by a crushing margin, George W. Bush in New Hampshire. And if you take a look, this is the polling, the average of the polling in New Hampshire right now. Look at that. It's Trump 43. It's Haley 30. Now, why does Haley have a chance to win here like John McCain did? It's the exact same model. John McCain appealed to independent voters in New Hampshire. He won them by a crushing majority over George W. Bush in 2000. Every one of the new polls that's come out in New Hampshire, they don't have Haley ahead of Trump overall yet, but they have Haley winning with independent voters. And we just showed in Iowa how strong she is with independent voters. And the key is that independent voters play a much bigger role in the New Hampshire primary than they do in virtually any other state. But we could fill some of this in right now from what we've learned from Iowa, which is a comparison of the demographics of these three states. Iowa now 54% evangelical tonight, 16% independent, 10% moderate. That's the electorate that has Haley running 30 points behind Donald Trump. This is what the electorate looked like in New Hampshire in 2016. Only 25% evangelical, a much more secular Republican electorate. Look at the number of independents who took Republican ballots, 42% of the Republican electorate, 27% moderate. So these are the ingredients. These are the perfect ingredients for Nikki Haley here compared to Iowa. So that's why she's close in the state. And the wild card is those independents. There is a Democratic primary. There's a write-in effort for Joe Biden. But I expect most independents are going to choose to participate in the Republican primary. So that 42% number, remember, there was a big race there in 2016 on the Democratic side. I suspect that 42% number may go up. And the higher it goes up, the better Haley's chances are in New Hampshire. And as you say, that would then go down to South Carolina. That would be her home state. And you see the demographics in South Carolina. Again, they look very different. Very evangelical. Far fewer independents taking part. Fewer moderates in the race. And again, if you think back to 2000 and John McCain, what tripped up John McCain? He won New Hampshire. And he became a political sensation. It was the story in American politics for 3 weeks. Bush versus McCain. Could McCain actually pull this off? What stopped McCain was the way he won New Hampshire. He won New Hampshire on the strength of independent voters. The exit polls showed that Bush actually won registered Republicans. McCain won independents. So they went down to South Carolina, and Bush made it a loyalty test to Republicans. And he said, my opponent is winning the votes of non-Republicans. He's winning independents. He's winning Democrats. He's winning the votes of people who want to cause mischief in our primary. The media, the liberal media, our enemy, is cheering him on. Are you with them or are you with me, a good Republican? And South Carolina went for Bush by double digits. And then it became a pattern. McCain stayed in it for another week or two, and state after state where your independents and Democrats were allowed to vote, McCain won huge among that group. But among Republicans, Bush started winning by 40, 50, 60 points over McCain. And within 3 weeks, Bush had shut down McCain. Trump, a long way of saying, Trump coming out of if Haley wins New Hampshire, Trump is positioned to make the same loyalty argument that George W. Bush made all those years ago. It wouldn't be so much loyalty to the Republican Party as loyalty to Trump, but Trump is extremely well liked among Republican voters. And we have seen this time and time again. again, who were the least popular Republicans to run this cycle? They were Chris Christie, Mike Pence, and Asa Hutchinson. When you are defined as the candidate of Trump's critics, of Trump's opponents, when you yourself issue criticisms of Donald Trump, Republican voters who like Donald Trump, and that is the vast majority of Republican voters, turn on you. So that's the danger for Nikki Haley. I think she could win New Hampshire. The demographic mix is perfect for her. But if she does so, it would be with independent voters. They would be the ones making the difference. And I think Republican voters, history tells us, would be very suspicious of a candidate like that. And if you get beyond South Carolina, and again, if she loses her home state, that's a tough one to explain. But when you get beyond that, the playing field shifts, and we start getting to states that aren't officially winner-take-all states in terms of delegates, but they are states that where the winner could take all of the delegates or the vast majority. I'll just give you some of the examples. March 5th on Super Tuesday, the biggest state to vote is going to be California, 169 delegates in California. The Republicans, at the behest of the Trump campaign, changed the rules. They said if you get 50% plus one in California, you get all 169 delegates. New poll today, Cal Berkeley, Donald Trump in California, 66% of the vote in California. He would sweep all 169 if he got anything approaching that on March 5th. You look at some of the other states, Alabama, 50 delegates. There'd be an opportunity for Donald Trump to sweep all 50 of those delegates. You've got Tennessee voting that day, 58 delegates. You've got Oklahoma, 43. Trump could take the lion's share in both of those states, along with North Carolina, 74. Texas, 161. They have provisions in a lot of these states where if you're winning congressional districts and getting a 50% in a congressional, you get all the delegates in the congressional district. If you get 50% statewide, you get all the statewide delegates. So the opportunity for Trump on March 5th, if he's putting up numbers and registering support with Republicans, the way he is tonight and the way he is in these polls, the opportunity is there for him to take a gigantic delegate lead in this race. The delegates rules on the Republican side are not at all like the Democratic side, where you just get 15% and you start getting a big chunk of every state's delegates. It's hard to pull away in a Democratic primary. On a Republican primary, it's easy.
And by the way, I think what Steve is saying is so important, and the evangelical piece, you cannot overemphasize it enough. I was just Googling from PRI, the numbers. Evangelical voters are 14.5% of the United States, but they're 28% of all voters. But of white evangelical voters, I should say, 76% of them voted for Donald Trump in 2020. Mainline Protestants tend to split, and then black evangelicals tend to go very heavily for Democrats. The challenge for Nikki Haley is that even if she does well and somehow wins a miraculous race in New Hampshire, everywhere else that she has to win is full of white evangelical voters. They're overrepresented.
Crossover. With that independent voter in New Hampshire, there's no crossover with that voter and an evangelical voter who just voted in Iowa saying, I'm anti-immigrant and Donald Trump is the chosen one. They're never going to pick Nikki Haley. I'm not even saying that to be sassy. We're hearing it
not
over
at all.
and over.
And where they're overrepresented, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That's to say nothing of the entire South. The challenge Nikki Haley has is that she could be a one-hit wonder in New Hampshire, and she will get a lot of media attention. But in the end, and we've literally been writing squirreling notes to each other, the problem she's going to have, however much her donors may dream of her being the new George W. Bush and somehow recreating the George W. Bush electorate, the actual electorate, the real electorate in the Republican Party is heavily made up of white evangelical voters for whom it is a religious test that they support Donald Trump. I don't know how she gets past that, even if she wins.
The pipe dream.
Very interesting about those voters tonight, and I don't think we could have learned this without the Dobbs decision, because during the Roe versus Wade years, the abortion politics were locked in place. And so there were most Republican candidates were running on no exceptions, banning all abortions. John McCain, when he ran for president, didn't understand the language of that. So when he was asked the first time he ran for president, what about if your daughter was pregnant? Would you absolutely forbid an abortion? And he said, well, we'd have a family meeting about that. And he had to reverse himself within 24 hours because the answer had to be absolutely no abortion. It was all theoretical, though, because abortion was legal throughout the country because of Roe versus Wade. Now we have tonight these voters who are as conservative on abortion as they get in the United States of America. They ranked for us the importance of these issues in their voting. Abortion, 12%, tied with foreign policy. Immigration is triple that.
Right, yeah.
And then what they did with their vote was vote for the guy who, in Republican terms, is very weak on abortion. Mike Pence thought that he had Donald Trump cornered when Donald Trump opposed DeSantis's 6-week ban in Florida. DeSantis thought he had him cornered, too. Trump said to these voters who accept it, a lot of people don't know. Most people don't know they're pregnant within 6 weeks. Trump says that's no good. And then what is Trump's position? He says, I will negotiate a period of time that everyone will agree on. Well, the Supreme Court negotiated a period of time called Roe versus Wade. He pretends that he will come in and negotiate this magic period. And he's saying that to voters who want the period to be zero. And they still vote for him. And so what those voters said tonight is, we don't mean it. We, the voters of Iowa, we don't really mean in our voting what we say publicly about the absolutism of our abortion position. And we could never have known that without this collapse of the Roe versus Wade regime.
And because it is a political faction.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a name on it that sounds theological.
Right.
But what it is, what it has become, what it has evolved to in the Trump era is a political faction that is anti-democratic, pro-Trump as a strongman leader, and calls it Christian nationalism, regardless of any link to any theological tradition whatsoever, and regardless of whether or not they have any link to any church. It's, I am not a Catholic, I am not a Jew, and I am right-wing and willing to get rid of democracy. That's what evangelical means in real political terms
and just
right
a
now.
personal note on this. When I was working in the Senate in the Roe versus Wade years, I did not believe a single one of the Republican senators working in that building with me actually believed what they said about abortion. I had reason to not believe that a single one meant it. But I did have reason to believe that evangelical Christians in Iowa meant it. Turns out they didn't.